Thus spoke Kishibe Rohan, a series, whether you love it or you hate it, is Araki's baby. And I mean that in the way that Hirohiko Araki loves to write about Rohan in whatever way possible more than pretty much any other character in the entire franchise. Yeah, at one point he did say he liked Josuke more, but we can actually see where his loyalty actually lies, writing about this mangaka, which is essentially his very own stand-in in the Jojo universe. I mean, just look at this. It is the only part of Jojo to consistently get a live-action adaptation, aside from that one Diamond is Unbreakable movie that didn't even break even, so it didn't even warrant a sequel. As of now, Rohan's also the only character that came from the original universe all the way over to the alternate universe with very little, if any, changes whatsoever. So we see that Rohan is a character that Araki loves to carefully craft in his own image, which makes it even more confusing about the recent things that we learned about how the most recent installment of the Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe live action installments came to be. Because right now in Japanese theaters, you would be able to see Rohan at the Confessional, an adaptation of the storyline with the exact same name, where we see Rohan go to Italy. But the story or the adaptation isn't where the story lies. It's actually in the soundtrack, surprisingly enough. Because the composer for this movie, Naruyoshi Kikuchi, actually proudly announced that this is the first project of its kind to have a soundtrack that was entirely composed and produced using AI. Something that you would have to torture out of other studios, because that is something that people just absolutely do not want to see in their media. And with good reason too. Our composer over here, if you can even actually call him that, used this artificial intelligence software called Max, which allowed him to program several different instruments inside of this system and then use them however he wanted by creating different scenarios and different text-based, different kinds of descriptions of how he wanted the music to sound. This is how he created the entire soundtrack for the film. And surprisingly enough, he actually said that he actually used this same method, not just on this one movie, but on previous Rohan features as well, such as for the Junkin Kid or the Rock, Paper, Scissors episode, and for Rohan at the Louvre, the one where Rohan went to the Louvre. So it doesn't seem to be like this is something that came all of a sudden, and it doesn't seem to be a big push from the higher ups to actually implement more AI elements. This is just something that he just decided to do all on his own. The majority of the works at Rohan at the Louvre were made by him personally and also his students using traditional methods. But as you can see, just based off this alone, that entire team that worked on that just got dwindled down to pretty much just him. Naruyoshi went on record further to say that he loved the solemn feeling that the musical compositions had and that they included things that he wouldn't have been able to include normally, such as like hallucinatory effects that made it seem a little bit more thrilling than an average movie soundtrack. And since I haven't seen the movie personally, I can't say just how thrilling and how solemn the music actually sounds. So I can't really throw in my hat in the ring for that. But I can talk about how it seems weird that this is something that was done for a JoJo project. Because when it comes to a topic like AI, Araki has actually been outspoken talking about his dislike for AI in general, calling it one of modern society's evils. On Araki's author notes on new manga techniques, he goes on to say that AI seems to be a tool that might be used for things like scamming people, and it seems like it's a tool for con artists. Throwing out this little anecdote as well, talking about how he saw this post online about a drawing that looked to be something that he drew, but upon further realization, it turned out that it was just a generative AI image. The only reason that he caught it, he says, is because it was something that was done with his newer style, so it was something that was more fresh in his mind. But if it was something that was done with his work from maybe 10 years prior, then that would have ended up being a little bit more difficult for him to actually notice that it would not have been him that drew that image. Araki would be worried about fraudsters that would come out that would create works claiming to be his. And of course, at the end of that little excerpt, he talks about how AI is also going to be seen as an evil when it comes to copyright infringement, because of course, AI is not something that can create something wholly on its own. It needs prior data in order to build on whatever you're trying to construct. So whether that be in the musical scene, you have to input previous notes, previous instruments, anyone's talent from before in order to create this generative composition. In terms of artwork, what it would look like is that someone would pretty much program all of Araki's paintings, drawings, sketches into a machine and essentially say, I want something that looks like that, but make it do this specific pose in this specific lighting with these specific characters. It does take the human element out of it by stripping away anything that could be considered really unique. So based on all this previous stuff, it just makes me wonder why Araki would let this movie, based on his own work, use a technique that he doesn't really approve of. The only thing that I can think of is in another excerpt where he talks about how whenever a director grabs his project or touches something that is his work, it no longer is his work. It becomes that director's and his vision. So he has to separate himself from whatever he's doing and whatever he's done and whatever everyone else wants to do with the story that they want to tell. So I think that's the only way I can kind of wrap my brain around it, but still, I feel like that just really goes against the original vision. That, and also the fact that Rohan as a character is someone that completely goes against everything AI stands for. I mean, just take a look at any episode of Diamond is Unbreakable or any single one of his side stories. Rohan is a character that is always looking to reinvent a part of himself or try and get more information, more knowledge, so that he can write more interesting stories. That's why he's gonna go on these misadventures or try and chase down these really weird leads. He's a guy that's very inspired to try and figure out all the different faces of life and try to figure out all of the different stories that someone can tell. That's why Heaven's Door is available to actually get those new branches of information from anyone he wants. Rohan is a mangaka that tries to push himself to his very limits as much as he can. And he's not the kind of guy that would seem to rely on cheap tricks or an easy way out to just make his manga work out the way that it should. I don't know. It's so weird to me that this is the movie, that this is the character, that this is the story that we're using AI for. And now, the post for this, it didn't come out recently. It came out a few months ago, back in March, when the movie's release date was first being announced. It's just that now that the movie's actually already premiered in Japan, that the story's been able to pick up more traction and people have been talking about it more and more. If I'm surprised by anything about this story, it isn't just that this is going to be an entirely AI soundtrack, but also that it is the first of its kind, it seems. Or that's what the composer claims here himself. I would have assumed that Hollywood would have actually taken a few more steps and actually done something like this in a much smaller degree, but still. Hopefully this isn't gonna be the opening of a whole new door for the industry to just look at how this movie's gonna perform and say, well, it looks like audiences didn't really care too much when it came to the music, so let's keep doing whatever they did. My main complaint with things like AI is that it becomes a crutch for people to use. Sure, the composer said that this introduced elements that he wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, but in reality, it just means that you would have to take a different way of making things. You would have to probably search for a sound, actually be willing to take more time to make exactly what you wanted to make, instead of just throwing it in a machine and waiting for a call and response as using Max delivered to him. He used Max in a way of generating a certain sound, giving it to something else, and then playing it back. It was a collaboration between two machines instead of where he could have actually been using a collaboration between different people. I don't know about it. Maybe in the next few months, Araki is going to come out and actually condemn whatever happened here, because as you know, Araki is a huge fan of music. Pretty much every stand has a reference to either a band name or a song name or a musician, anything that can be rooted to musical pop culture. Araki is a huge fan of it. So I don't even know how he could stand something like this being created under his name, pretty much. But I gotta throw it back to y'all. What do you guys think about a soundtrack like this being completely made by AI? Is that something that you're incredibly disappointed by, or something that you expected actually a few years ago? Let me know down in the comments below. I mean, with more prevalent uses of AI like this, it makes me a bit more worried. Just recently, we saw stories about how Hollywood executives have been talking about condensing down entire franchises like Twilight into anime just by using AI, and how that could just be exactly what the studio could use just to remake anything they want, essentially. Which to me sounds like it would just be completely half-assed, and that it would lack any sense of human connection, which makes it all the more plausible to it actually coming to fruition. So, I don't know. But on that note, as always, I was Randy, and I'll be seeing y'all next time. Peace.